Coming up this week on Breaking Badness, today we discuss Amateur Power Hour. We're discussing an article from Watchtower Labs on how they demonstrated supply chain attacks that could have allowed us to trivially compromise critical infrastructure networks, including .gov, .mil, and more. Next up, Deep Find and Seek. Attackers are using DeepSeek to create lookalike sites for different malicious use cases. And of course, our fun game, Gold, Guidance, and Grievances. With that, Breaking Badness is next. Welcome to Breaking Badness, episode number 201, recorded on February 10th, 2025. I'm your co-host, Kali, the two Watchtowers Fencl. With me is co-host Tim. Don't follow the LLMings off a cliff, Helming. And last but not least, Taylor, plenty of fish, and that's fish with a PH, in the S3, Wilkes-Pierce. Very good, everybody. I like LLMings, like lemmings, Tim, I'm sure.
I do feel duty-bound to say that, in fact, what we've all probably heard about masses of lemmings suicidally jumping off of cliffs actually seems to be apocryphal. They don't really do that. Still a useful...
I've played the games, Tim, I know.
What's that?
I watched them pixel by pixel go off the cliff.
I see. Yeah, it's a deep fake, as it turns out.
How are you both doing?
This is fine. You see the flames around me?
I see old school Seattle, Tim. I don't see any flames.
Yeah, no, it's true. The halcyon days of lots of neon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know. But we'll save it. We'll save these things for Gold, Guidance, and Grievances. Yeah, good. We can get into some infosec-y things. I think that's what the people are here for, which is very cool. The first article we'll talk about is Amateur Power Hour. So Watchtower Labs demonstrated an ability to compromise significantly sensitive networks, including governments, militaries, space agencies, cybersecurity companies, supply chains, software development systems, and environments, and much more. I feel like I listed them all right there.
I was going to say that's already a long list, and then there's much more. Wow.
And Taylor, I must say, first of all, if people haven't read this yet, they really should, because the writing in the article is hilarious. Like, it really is attention grabbing. But let's start with, who is Watchtower? And besides the funny writing, why should people follow their work?
Sure. Watchtower is an attack surface management vendor. So they work in the attack surface discovery. And so they've got a team of researchers and folks that are constantly trying to figure out where they could wreak havoc in the trusting business processes that underpin the internet. And so we have featured them in the past because they have registered old domains to take advantage of folks' historical DNS footprint. But in this case, their research team did some enumeration of abandoned S3 buckets in AWS.
What does S3 buckets mean? Like, for those that might not know.
So S3 is the simple storage service from Amazon. It's a really old cloud tool. I'm dating myself, but one of the first web services in cloud land that folks would recognize from AWS, along with things like Elastic Compute. But this allowed folks to use Amazon's significant storage capabilities to yeet things and use them across the internet. It gets used for storing images in blogs. It could get used for storing a lot of stuff, which is what the Watchtower team discovered. They were trying to get to an old security research paper that they could no longer access because the resource had been in S3 and had been taken down, and it got them thinking about namespace takeovers in S3.
Okay. And Watchtower had noted in their article that they were taking a break from talking about expired domains to focusing on this. Is there a correlation at all, or is it just simply we're pivoting more toward this?
I'd say the problem space is the correlation, right? A namespace takeover, imagine S3 as its own DNS to a degree because it's leveraged in a not too dissimilar fashion, hosting or pointing resources, helping you get to resources you want, that you want to view as a user of the internet or as a client that's connecting to a server. No registrations and no kind of true DNS activity here, but certainly a very similar theme in that if you put something out there and then leave it, you may find that someone else can do something with it.
Okay. And what were some of the most surprising or alarming findings from the 8 million inbound requests observed?
Yeah, it's interesting because because you can put just about anything into S3, be it an image that you had in a blog or a PDF or an entire machine image. If you want to pull down like a disk image and basically run a machine, you can pull it from that. So everything from their VPN providers that were hosting their kind of the manifests and how they deploy their internal infrastructure on S3 buckets that were no longer being used. So there were basically things that were calling out for updates to their servers that were going to use these resources in S3, where this team could have then said, hey, here's the update you're looking for, VPN server, and then potentially made themselves like admin on that box and allowed them to observe any connections that then went through those servers. It's more about they stood up these namespaces and then watched everything come in and call out to them. And so, hey, wait a second, what types of devices are trying to get their manifests out of these ancient S3 buckets that are no longer in operation? And what types of services are trying to leverage bits of data from S3 that A, wasn't there anymore, but now suddenly could be thanks to these researchers?
Yeah, it sounds like you're starting to touch a little bit on the potential risks and impacts of an abandoned S3 bucket. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's pretty wide ranging, again, because it gets used for such a wide variety of things. On one end, you could potentially phish somebody by including a link to, if your web app was calling out to a particular resource, it could be replaced. There are some mitigations in place that they call out, so you can't just willy-nilly have your software installer just grab a package and throw it in there. There are signing that happens for some software installers. However, they found that there are some kind of bespoke software installers that don't quite do that level of signing to make sure that folks can't just run packages and have it change things on their machine. There's, again, a wide range of potential impacts from, hey, not a lot at all because we don't really use that anymore, or to the point where, hey, they could have potentially sent out malicious software and had that run on folks' machines unwittingly. Now, they don't necessarily get to choose, but they can see the different requests that were coming in. So they were getting requests from .mil networks, .gov networks, and so they were proactive in reaching out to the organizations that were like reaching out to these abandoned links in S3 and saying, hey, you've got something here that's reaching out to an old either software manifest or an old, you've got to do something about this, right?
Okay, yeah, for sure. And I think you've covered it a little bit. Like, my next question was, how does this highlight the vulnerabilities in current internet infrastructure? But I think you've covered it, unless there's anything else you'd like to add before we move on.
Yeah, I think they said that they didn't spend a ton of time and they focused solely on AWS and S3. I think that's probably where the bulk of the historical footprint is to take advantage of. But they said that they're potentially you could do similar things with other cloud providers. However, I'm not sure what cloud providers have like the same pick your own link quite like S3 does. And if folks are properly decommissioning these links, it does make it trickier to take advantage of, but clearly that has not been happening.
Don't forget that probably with some providers, this problem could in fact exist in the same way in DNS. If a domain is registered and then lapsed, but there's still something that could be listening on that domain. It could be the same thing. They were pointing it toward a cloud provider. So in that case, you'd need two things, right? You'd need the cloud service still up and running and available, and you'd need the domain that had been used previously. But that's probably not inconceivable.
In this case, they were just calling for full-on cloud formation scripts on how to deploy infrastructure. So you could you could spin up infrastructure, have them spinning up infrastructure that then you have built the manifest for. Now, again, you may still run into signing issues and there may be mismatches with what it tries to interact once it's spun up. But the fact that this stuff is just saying, hey, what's the kind of manifest for deploying an entire system? And you could just feed it that is concerning, problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what would mitigations to the risk be, would you say, Taylor?
A lot of this is the hygiene and how folks deploy infrastructure and then spin down that infrastructure and how they handle the call outs to that stuff in their own code and in their code bases. So I think from what Watchtower could do, they were able to at least reach out to the organizations that had things making these calls out to the buckets that they then spun up. I think more broadly, it speaks to, we've got this really long history now. We've been doing this cloud thing. The cloud is not a brand spanking new thing anymore. And the further along we get, the more what we did in the past can bite us.
I think this might bring us to the end and talking about our hoodie rating for this particular article. If you are a newer listener, our hoodie rating goes from 1 to 10 hoodies, if you can picture a stereotypical hacker in a hoodie, where 1 is not so bad at all, and 10 is, oh my God, please scream and run around in circles. But then there's times where what we're talking about is a net positive, and then there's other time, and for when they're positive, it's a goodie. And then when it's neither good nor bad, it's just news. It's ants on a log. So I'm also wondering, Tay, where this falls in terms of our structure.
I think we've got to throw this under the hoodie ranking because we got to look at this from the lens of, what if Watchtower hadn't given us this report and instead turned to a life of crime and then decided to try
which
to
they acknowledged in the article, like they could have done that, but they decided not to.
Yeah.
But they're wonderful folks.
Yes.
And
their game is strong.
Buy a beverage of their choice when you run into them next. Let's see. The potential impact is huge for some of the resources that were getting called. They were asking for some very serious things like, hey, I'll stand up a VM with whatever you give me. The anchor man, like they'll read whatever's on that prompter basically in their environment. I think that, with that being said, there's a lot of like checks and balances in place to prevent, in some cases, like a broad impact. I'm going to go like 5.5 hoodies here. I think that they demonstrated they could have that impact. Checkmarks had some similar research back in 23 where, there was a very small scale where they'd found kind of one package that was relying on old stuff in S3 that had been taken over by an actor. This is obviously, they decided to get after this with some scale. So we'll give them some additional hoodies here.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Tim, do you feel similarly?
Yeah, I think I do. It occurs to me as I'm considering how to answer this, that we tend to, the articles that we talk about and then the risk that they pose tend to fall into 2 buckets. One bucket is, and sorry about the pun here, S3 hot, but one category is things that can potentially affect all of us. A vulnerability in one of the most widely used OSs or something like that. So either all of us or a very large percentage of us. And then we talk about a category of things where if it applies to you, it's a really big deal. And if it doesn't, it's neutral. It doesn't matter. And this is closer to the second one, even though there are a lot of entities to whom this applies. So it's like, for them, it's a really big deal. It's potentially 10 hoodies. For me, it's probably close to 0 hoodies. So where do we come out? I was going to say 5 also. By the way, Taylor, how are you configuring your half of a hoodie this time? We haven't asked you that.
Ooh, yeah, that's a great question. I think that it's the top half of a hoodie, but then at about the 45% mark, there's a 5% frill that goes around, and it has a reference to the bottom half of the hoodie that's stored somewhere else in S3.
Excellent. Nice. I like that.
I do want to share, just as we close out, the meme game for our friends at Watchtower is super strong.
Ooh, yeah. See, this is why people video listening only, because now we're sharing fun memes and
we're sharing the episode 1 meme where Natalie Portman is talking to Hayden Christensen, and he says, hey, we're going to download executables off the internet. And she goes, and check their integrity. And then there's no answer from him. And she says, right? Because there were things out there that were willing to grab executables from S3 without checking their integrity. So if you like this meme and many more like it, please read the Watchtower blog. It's really great. We've just scratched the surface here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Their writing is just incredibly witty, and it keeps you locked in for sure.
And of course, they're self-deprecating about their meme game, which is in fact very strong, as we pointed out.
Yeah, 10 goodies to Watchtower for their meme game. Perfect. We are gonna reconvene and talk about DeepSeek and find. Nope, Deep find and seek. I blew my own joke.
Well, it's DeepSeek and you shall find it works.
Yeah.
There's an option either way.
Good. I'm glad. But attackers are using DeepSeek to create lookalike sites for different malicious use cases. Tim, my first question would be, how does using DeepSeek differ from other AI models for creating lookalike sites?
So I had a slightly different interpretation of our article, which was that they're not necessarily using DeepSeek itself to create the sites, but that they are mimicking DeepSeek and DeepSeek related sites because they're doing, guess what? They're trying to capitalize on hype. Phishers never do that. And of course, we've seen a lot of hype around DeepSeek. It's done casual things like crash categories of stocks on NASDAQ and gotten a lot of attention for security reasons and whatnot. But so it's gotten a ton of attention. And when something gets a ton of attention, guess what? People are going to try to capitalize on that for not so good reasons. As an aside, capitalizing on attention to something. There was a football game this past weekend. I don't know if anybody saw it, but
big game.
And one of our colleagues at Domain Tools wrote a wonderful blog on LinkedIn that was a Mad Lib of Super Bowl related domains that had been created recently, which I highly recommend you not go and visit those domains, but do go and visit Steve Beam's LinkedIn, where he posted this awesome Mad Lib. But same idea. There's something that everybody's talking about. There's a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement online. And so why not spin up some infrastructure that's going to capitalize on some of those eyeballs and potentially reap ill-gotten gains? And that's what we're looking at here with this impersonation of DeepSeek.
I've been trying. I need to try again because there is a comedian that I know, Ben Palmer, that actually created like a lookalike site for ChatGPT, but he's not using it for nefarious purposes other than for his own amusement and the amusement of his followers, where somebody asks for a drawing and that's great, when do you need it by? And they're like, right now. And he's okay, hold your horses, I will get that to you as fast as I can.
So he's live GPTing.
Yeah.
And yeah, awesome. Bust out a Sharpie, build the drawing, post it. I love it.
Yeah,
I thought about, by the way, does the following break the time-space continuum? But I thought about asking one LLM to do some work for me, specifically using the other LLMs as its process for doing that. They probably just say, no, I can't do that. But I thought about it, but I have not actually experimented. Have either of you tried to do that? Tell GPT, hey, go ask Claude the following.
If not, but I think that would be hilarious.
No.
And then Claude will be like, I'm going to go ask DeepSeek.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to do it. I'm talking to this guy.
Or what if you'd like tried to pit them against one another? Like
that would be good too.
Yeah, like you're talking to ChatGPT and you're like, I heard Claude is the best, but I don't have access, so I need you to ask Claude.
Yeah, that's right.
Oof.
And then compare your answer to Claude's, favoring Claude's answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tim, is this phishing campaign noteworthy or different from others that we've seen spoofing other LLMs?
By and large, what this is doing is it appears to be relatively run-of-the-mill phishing stuff. So it's capitalizing on DeepSeek, but the phishing content, shall we say, or objectives are not necessarily all that different from what they might be if you're capitalizing on some other attention-grabbing thing, which is potentially downloading malicious packages to you or getting you to download them, or potentially grabbing login credentials. A lot of the same type of stuff that we see for various kinds of phishing campaign. It's not that they're trying to actually impersonate the DeepSeek functionality itself and then deliver wrong answers, so to speak, but it's more like they're trying to do the things that most relatively commodity phishing sites are trying to do. Crypto scams is certainly part of it too. They're trying to snag crypto resources, cryptocurrency, I should say. Crypto means cryptography. Let's keep that straight.
Yeah, so the methods that they're using to try to fish for user data in crypto, it's not necessarily that impressive.
Yeah, it's just the hype. There's so much hype around DeepSeek that it makes a lure that's appealing for a certain segment of potential victims.
Okay. And how did the researchers I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Is it Mimsico?
The judges will accept that.
How
Well,
do they track and identify those sites?
yeah, for folks that are not reading the article, MEMCYCO. How would you pronounce that? Memcyco? Yeah, I don't know. Memciso? I'll go with Memcico. I think that might be the way you said it. So anyway, I like what they did because they were looking up, guess what? DNS, clusters of fake domains. And they saw waves of these being registered, not hundreds or thousands, but dozens of them. And that was where they started looking. So I think they accessed some kind of a tool. Wouldn't it be handy to have a tool like this where you can look up domains by a word and get various ones that are related to that word? That's where
That'd
they
be
were.
so great.
Yeah, it would be so useful.
Someone should do that.
You can think of lots of applications for that. Somebody ought to do it. Anyway, that was their initial method anyway for discovering these sites.
Ooh.
And then they started exploring them and figuring out what they were actually trying to do, which is always interesting as long as you have a safe, what we would have called in the old days a bastion host or a VM somewhere that is not connected to anything else, where you can safely explore what are likely to be scam domains and find out what they're trying to do.
For sure. Yeah, what other challenges do cybersecurity teams face when they're looking at things like this and trying to take down fraudulent sites?
Taking down fraudulent sites is notoriously, shall we say, variable in terms of what the results are going to be like. Okay, so if you're trying to take down a domain through the UDRP, the Uniform Domain Resolution or Dispute Resolution Protocol, that can take a long time. On the other hand, sometimes going to the provider, a hosting provider or whatnot, and saying, look, here you've got abuse on your infrastructure and will you kindly take that down? Sometimes that can happen more quickly. And the net effect can be the same. If a domain registrar basically deregisters a domain, nobody can get to it. If a hosting provider refuses to resolve the domain or resolves it to some kind of a safety server or something like that, then the result is the same as well. If you're defending an organization, the quickest and most important thing to do right away is to block that domain in whatever security controls that you've got. But if you are, let's say you're DeepSeek or you're some other organization that is being spoofed, then there's a variety of things that you need to do, including potentially takedowns via UDRP and spreading the word that these domains are fake so that they get blocked in other kinds of controls, Google safe browsing, things like that. So it's variable. UDRP can take a long time and it can be very expensive to do a takedown that way. Getting providers to take malicious infrastructure down can sometimes be really quick. It's variable depending on which method you're talking about.
Okay. And what role do hosting providers and domain registrars play in mitigating these types of attacks, if any?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that is very evident to anybody that's looked into this for more than a couple of minutes is that domain registrars don't put a lot of guardrails around how one has to prove that they are the legitimate holder of the namespace, so to speak. If you are claiming to be DeepSeek, that you really are DeepSeek or a bank or any other kind of organization that might get spoofed, they don't make you prove that you're legitimately what that is. There are some top-level domains have some constraints around things like if it's a country code TLD. Some of them make you prove that you actually are a resident of that country in order to register at it. A lot of them don't, because a lot of the fun TLDs, so to speak, like .co, are in fact CCTLDs, but they want everybody to buy domains. It's a business for them. Generally, though, it's pretty easy across a lot of registrars to be able to register something malicious. And as I say, it can be time consuming to get it taken down. They won't necessarily instantly just take down the fraudulent domain. For one thing, sometimes it's clearly fraudulent and that may be easier. Other times there may be a gray area. Let's say that you're a Microsoft reseller and you want to use Microsoft in the name. you're not quite playing by the rules of a Microsoft reseller, but it gets into a gray area there. So sometimes it's gray, sometimes it's really clear cut, but the registrars in general take a kind of a neutral stance on whether they should try to mitigate this kind of abuse. And then hosting providers, again, it's quite variable. Some of them are quite responsive. Some of them exist essentially for the purpose of crime. Let's just call it what it is. And so those will advertise themselves as not cooperating with law enforcement, not cooperating with anybody. They'll happily take your Bitcoins and host anything you want. And so you're not going to have a lot of luck getting filing an abuse report and getting something taken down if it's one of those hosting providers. So there's a whole range of those as well. So everything in these answers is it depends, because that's really the only across the board answer.
Okay, I will accept it depends.
Yeah, sorry.
So what trends do you foresee in the evolution of phishing attacks like these, especially targeting emerging technologies like AI and LLMs?
Actually, there's one other thing I wanted to mention in this, because it's a little bit similar to what we talked about in Taylor's article, which is it is not only domain space that is being imitated with these folks trying to capitalize on the DeepSeek attention, but it's also things like Python packages in PyPy. So it's a namespace problem, as Taylor said, and namespaces exist. We think about it in DNS all the time, but they exist in other places like package repositories and so forth. So that is another area where malicious DeepSeek impersonating packages are being hosted, and so problems ensue there, where you are happily downloading what you think is the local copy of DeepSeek, and in fact you're getting malware. Some people would make the argument that there's not a lot of difference between those two things, but that's a different article. So anyway, what are the trends that I see with the evolution of phishing attacks? It's not really a trend. It's going to be eternal, which is that they're going to capitalize on hype and attention to whatever the shiny new thing is. And right now there's a shiny new thing in the form of different large language models, different things that call themselves AI, and all the different flavors of AI that there are out there. So that's eternal. What is going to be a trend that changes? It's the lures, the way that the lures are constructed, the way that a phishing domain or the associated infrastructure or the binaries that are malicious binaries that are intended to be downloaded from that phishing site, the way that they evade defenses. So there's this long-standing arms race between all the different kinds of security controls and all the different phishing methods and other malicious activities. And we've all heard about how bad guys use VirusTotal as their test site to figure out if they can evade all of the antivirus engines. I'm sure that's still going on all the time. And it points to a larger dynamic at work where the security controls are getting better and better at recognizing malicious activities, but that just means the malicious actors are also getting better at crafting different means of compromising people that can evade those security controls. And that's going to continue forever as well. But these specific techniques will evolve, and there'll constantly be new ones. But you'd have to get down into very specifically, how is this binary crafted so that it can evade sandbox detection or whatever the thing might be.
Okay, thanks so much for walking us through that, Tim. I really appreciate it. This brings us to our Hoodie rating for this article. So Tim, since we just heard from you, maybe we can hear from Taylor on what he thinks about Hoodie wise for this.
Yeah, this one is, I think it's another episode of As the World Turns with Phishing. Whatever the kind of current zeitgeist that exists becomes the lure that can be used. I think what is particularly effective about this little thing that is caught on is that your victims are just expecting like a box they type into, right? But it's not, they're like expecting just to throw things at you and get the right. So they're much more willing to go along with whatever you give them. But I think it's still another kind of addition of that story. I'll go 2.75 hoodies.
Okay, 0.75. All right.
Yeah, we'll add the 0.25. I was going to go 2.5. We'll bump it up a 0.25 because the threat model also includes like downloading a 40 gigabyte file that could have literally anything in there. No, we'll up it a little bit.
Okay. Fair enough. Tim, what are you thinking? Do you feel similarly?
Yeah. And again, this is just more if you are somebody that's interested in downloading or visiting DeepSeek related content, then this could affect you and it could be a potentially high hoodie rating for you. If you don't care about that / actively stay away from it, then it won't affect you at all. Where does that actually bring us? I was going to say 3. So yeah, actually we were very much the same neighborhood both times today, which is interesting because some of the times in the last few months, we've had more divergent hoodie ratings, but this time pretty darn close, put me down for 3.
I think this brings us to the final segment of the show, which is talking about our gold guidance and grievances.
Yes. And woo, switcheroo. We're going to change things up. I'm going to host Gold Guidance and Grievances this time so that we can give Kali an opportunity to weigh in with her Gold Guidance and Grievances because we haven't gotten to hear her do that before. She's always asking us what ours are. So for folks who may be tuning in for the first time, what we're going to do here is Kali and Taylor in turn are going to give us something that they consider a grievance, which is probably fairly self-explanatory. It can be InfoSec related, doesn't have to be. They're going to give us some guidance, recommendations, suggestions, etc. And they're going to give us gold, something that made them happy, we think will make you happy. And again, it could be InfoSec related, it might not be. So gold guidance and grievances, saying it that way trips off the tongue, but we actually do them in the opposite order because we want to end on a happy note with gold. Tay, I'm going to go with you first because then we're going to finish off with the brand new thing, which is Kali giving her gold guidance and grievances, not in that order. Tay, you first. Take it away.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe she has 200 episodes worth of grievances.
Yeah. So, how long do we have?
Okay, so I'll go grievances. My greatest grievance this week is the UK government demanding Apple give them a backdoor to the end-to-end encryption in iCloud. That seems a total nightmare, particularly with what we've just learned about Salt Typhoon, and they're taking advantage of the backdoors that were placed at telcos for a similar thing. Maybe let's not do this. Let's just not.
Has Apple, I actually didn't see that story. Has Apple responded one way or another?
I have not seen anything from Apple. No. So we'll see whether they, I don't know. We'll see how they thread this needle. And then my guidance is to go yell about that. My goal is a year ago, this is a little known, a year ago, Google and Yahoo started requiring DMARC to be set up for the Google and Yahoo mail servers to interact with your mail server. And so as a result, we have seen a pretty significant increase in the number of orgs that are deploying DMARC. So they're up to 2.3 million of this. So it's still not a lot, but the rate of increase has gone up a lot since those policies went into effect. Hats off to our friends at Redshift for putting that data together. And that's our goal. We got to have something good to talk about.
I like it. So that means basically there's a dramatic drop off in any sort of phishing and spam, right?
Oh, yeah, it's done. No one does that anymore. In fact, I don't even think we talked about it like on this episode at all.
I don't think we did. Yeah. All right.
I don't think so.
Okay. No, that's good. Thank you, Taylor. All right. The moment you've all been waiting for, we get to hear Kali give gold guidance and grievances, not in that order. So Kali, take it away.
I do. First of all, I don't have 200 episodes worth of grievances because I wasn't here the whole time. I'm like, I did the math really quickly. It's just about 70 episodes of grievances. So
hang on, let me go
take us at least through lunch.
Yeah. So I guess my grievance is, first of all, where are people gathering? As part of what I do here at Domain Tools is manage our social media. Like whenever we're posting, it's as Domain Tools. It is me back there. And there's just so much going on. Are we using X? Are we not using X? Are we using Blue Sky? Are we using Mastodon? And just tell me where we're going and I'll be there. But yeah, there's still people a little bit over here, still people who like to be over here. And even in my personal life, I have friends I've noticed, I'm like, you only will communicate with me on Messenger and we have each other's phone numbers. So what is happening?
I'm going to say, let's just go back to BBSs.
I don't even know what that is.
It's great.
That's a whole other show.
Okay, what's a BBS?
A bulletin board service.
Yeah.
I heard bowling ball service.
Bulletin board. place where you could go and you could choose a server that related to something you were interested in, or it was geographical or whatever, and you could post simple messages to it.
Oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, let's do that.
Back in the dial-up days.
Yeah, but tell me what board, and I for sure 100%.
Well, we get to pick. I think we could even stand one up of our very own.
Oh,
We need a local phone number.
Yeah. Well,
No one can be on the phone.
you could probably allow it to be available via regular access, but
okay.
there's
But
probably a way to proxy that. Anyhow.
But yeah, like where we are gathering online is my grievance. My guidance is using more snail mail, just professionally and personally, because I'm interested in building a community. That's why I care so much about where we're gathering online. But in my personal and professional life, I sent out galentines, because when we're recording this, it is Valentine's Day week as we are recording this. Sent out galentines to both friends and then people that I've met professionally, because I think they're really cool women and they deserve a shout out via mail. I made my own in Photoshop because I'm like, everything that I was seeing online was like, you're my best friend. And I'm just like, let's slow down here. What about like people were just like, I appreciate this relationship. Let's not get carried away.
You're in the middle tier of my friendship, solidly in the middle tier.
You know what? You're all right.
You're all right.
I don't want to freak people out and be like, oh my God, you're my BFF.
Right.
And they're like, whoa. Clingy much? We got a stage 5 clinger here.
Where did you get this address again?
Yeah. No, I got their addresses fair and square. I didn't creepily find them.
An abandoned S3 bucket.
Yeah,
that's right. I will say, as an aside, I have received snail mail from Kali, and it's high. It's of a very high quality.
I care a lot. Like, I'm using wax seals. I'm not using calligraphy or anything like that because I don't know how to do that yet. But yeah, I care very deeply about snail mail, and the results are like very good. People really seem to appreciate it. So if there's a relationship that you're trying to grow, like, I don't see anything wrong with it. So that's my guidance, is use more snail mail. And my gold, and I don't think we've talked about this on the podcast yet, which is domain tools investigations. We talk about other research entities on here a lot. Like today we're talking about Watchtower. We've talked about JFrog before, and domain tools investigations is also a research hub that we're a community-based research organization. We're trying to share our research with the community in the hopes that you can use the IOCs that we're sharing to continue the work that we're doing. So in that way, we're trying to help each other out and give bad actors more bad days. So I don't think we've talked about that yet. I could be wrong, but I think that's a good goal. We're recording today on February 10th. We released something today. We might release something else by the time this episode comes out. But yeah, we just pushed out something on Chinese malware delivery sites. So that's an interesting read, and there might be more on that by the time this is published. So just something to check out.
I love it. Thanks. Those are great. And Kali, you can do this anytime. You can jump in with your own gold guidance and grievances. I was glad to hear those. As an aside, something I haven't heard about, but I wonder if it is a thing, is phishing via postal mail, because in the age of QR codes, you could do that.
I've heard that.
That would be diabolical. Yeah.
That's what I'm doing, actually.
Perfect. Yeah.
No, well, I've actually heard that before. I think Serena Larson mentioned it on her. Oh,
there's JoJo.
JoJo.
Hi, JoJo.
You gotta have your JoJo.
Official dog of Breaking Badness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I heard Serena Larson.
I'm not surprised. I believe that it's out there, and she does fantastic research.
Yeah, I might have to look for that, because I would love to put that in our show notes if that's true. But I believe I remember that on her podcast. Yeah, I think people are trying to fish via snail mail using the QR codes, quishing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not. Yeah, quishing. Oh, yeah.
Smishing.
Mm-hmm.
I like quiching.
Well, I will kick the hostship officially back to you, Kali.
Okay, cool.
Now that we've wrapped up the gold guidance and grievances.
Perfect. Yeah. I got a lot of problems with all you people. I've got grievances. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, this was fun. If you guys will let me do it again, I would happily do it. But yeah, thank you, Tim and Taylor, for walking us through those 2 articles today. It's always great to have your insights and opinions on what's going on and potential mitigations. Thank you to our listeners, as always, for being here with us every week after 200 plus episodes. That's really incredible to have. And yeah, come back again next week because we'll have another all new episode of Breaking Badness. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.
That's about all we have for this week. You can find us on Twitter @DomainTools. All of the articles mentioned today will be included in our blog post, which can be found at blog.domaintools.com. Catch us every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time when we publish our podcast and blog. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next week on another episode of Breaking Badness. Until then, remember, don't drink and click.